She didn't even wait until the flowers from the funeral had wilted. Standing in the middle of our father's living room, my sister announced that the family estate was now hers. The house, the land, everything. She spoke like a queen claiming her throne. I said nothing. But as she turned to discuss selling the property, the gardener who had worked for our family for 40 years walked toward me with a sealed letter and whispered, "Your father told me to give you this. If she ever did exactly this, my name is Daniel Harper. I'm the younger of 2 siblings, though growing up, it always felt like I was the invisible one." My sister, Victoria, was bold, sharp, and endlessly confident. She had a way of walking into a room as if it already belonged to her. I preferred quiet corners, books, and long conversations with our father on the back porch of the estate. The house wasn't just property. It had been in our family for 3 generations, a sprawling piece of land with old oak trees. A greenhouse my mother adored, and a study where my father kept meticulous journals of everything he built. That estate wasn't measured in acres. It was measured in memories. Victoria left for the city the moment she could. Big career, big social circles, bigger ambitions. She visited on holidays, sometimes with expensive gifts, sometimes with opinions about how outdated everything looked. I stayed, not because I lacked ambition, but because someone had to be there when our parents needed help. Doctor appointments, repairs, managing the staff. Sitting with our father during his final months, when pride kept him from admitting he was tired. He never said it directly, but I knew he valued loyalty over noise, quiet presence over loud promises. And in those final weeks, when Victoria barely found time to visit, I often caught my father watching the estate from his study window, as if he were deciding who truly understood what it meant. Looking back now, I realize something. Inheritance isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stayed when leaving was easier. The funeral ended under a gray sky, the kind that makes everything feel unfinished. Guests offered condolences. Cars slowly pulled away, and within an hour the house felt strangely hollow. I was still standing near the fireplace when Victoria walked back in, not grieving, not reflective, but focused. She asked the family lawyer to gather us in the dining room. The same room where birthdays were celebrated and holidays were loud with laughter now felt like a boardroom. Papers were placed on the table. Coffee cups replaced candles. When the will was read, it sounded simple and final. The estate, house, land, and controlling authority over all associated assets was legally transferred to Victoria. She didn't look surprised. In fact, she looked prepared. "Well," she said, folding her hands as if concluding a meeting, "this is for the best. The property needs modernization. I already have a buyer interested." A buyer, the word echoed in the room. Our father had built this estate brick by brick. He used to say it wasn't just land, it was legacy. Within an hour of burying him, my sister was discussing market value. She turned to me then, her tone almost sympathetic, but edged with superiority. "You never liked responsibility, Daniel. This is complicated work. I'll handle it." I didn't argue. Didn't remind her who managed the renovations, the accounts, the staff schedules when our father grew ill. I simply nodded. Outside the dining room window, I noticed Thomas, our gardener of 40 years, standing unusually still. He wasn't trimming hedges. He wasn't moving tools. He was watching the house. Watching her. And for the first time that day, I sensed that something about this final decision wasn't as settled as my sister believed. Victoria wasted no time. By the next morning, she was walking through the estate with her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in sharp, efficient tones about valuations and development potential. I overheard phrases like boutique hotel, subdivision, tax advantage. Each word felt like a small fracture running through the walls of the house I had grown up in. She summoned the staff into the courtyard that afternoon. Her voice was polite, but detached. "There will be changes," she said. "I'll be reviewing contracts. Some positions may no longer be necessary." Thomas stood at the edge of the group, hands folded behind his back, his weathered face unreadable. He had planted half the trees on this land. He knew which roses my mother favored, and which corner of the garden my father retreated to when he needed silence. Victoria, he was just another expense line. Later that evening, I found her in our father's study, opening drawers, scanning documents, measuring the room with her eyes, as if imagining it stripped and redesigned. She didn't notice me at first. When she did, she smiled faintly. "You'll understand one day," she said. "Sentiment doesn't pay taxes." Maybe she was right. Maybe legacy doesn't appear on spreadsheets. But as I stepped outside onto the porch, I saw Thomas waiting near the old oak tree. He wasn't working. He was watching the house again the way a man watches something precious being dismantled, piece by piece. When our eyes met, he gave a slight nod. Not agreement, not approval, recognition. And in that silent exchange, I realized this wasn't just about property anymore. Something had shifted, something my sister hadn't anticipated. It was late afternoon when Thomas finally approached me. The sun hung low over the west field, casting long shadows across the lawn my father used to walk every evening. Victoria's voice echoed faintly from inside the house, still on the phone, still negotiating something that didn't belong in her hands yet. "Daniel," Thomas said quietly, using the tone he once used when I was a boy who had broken a window and needed steady advice. "May I have a word?" We walked toward the old oak tree at the edge of the garden, the one my grandfather planted when the estate was first expanded. Thomas reached into the inner pocket of his worn jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. The paper was aged, the handwriting unmistakable. My father's. "He gave this to me 6 months ago," Thomas said. "He told me to keep it safe. Said if your sister ever tried to sell the estate immediately after he was gone, I was to give it to you." My heart tightened. The seal was unbroken. My name was written clearly across the front. I looked back at the house. Victoria was standing in the study window, unaware, confident, already planning renovations. "Why didn't he give it to me directly?" I asked. Thomas met my eyes steadily. "Because he knew you would never ask for it." The weight of those words settled deeper than the envelope in my hands. Whatever was inside had been prepared long before today, long before the funeral, long before Victoria made her announcement. And for the first time since the will was read, I felt something shift. Not anger, not grief, but certainty. I didn't open the envelope immediately. I sat on the bench beneath the oak tree, running my thumb along the seal, memorizing the weight of it. Inside the house, I could still hear Victoria's voice, confident, decisive, already reshaping the future. Finally, I broke the seal. The handwriting was steady, unmistakably my father's. "Daniel, if you're reading this, then your sister has done exactly what I feared. She moved too quickly." My chest tightened. The will she heard is not the whole story. The estate was placed into a conditional trust 3 years ago. Ownership transfers to Victoria only if she preserves the property as our family home for no less than 1 year. If she attempts to sell, transfer, or commercially develop it within that time, control shifts automatically to you as executor. I stopped breathing for a moment. Conditional trust, executor, automatic transfer. The words weren't emotional. They were precise, legal, deliberate. At the bottom of the page, one final line stood out. "Legacy is not inherited by the loudest voice. It is protected by the steadiest hands." I lowered the letter slowly. Inside the house, Victoria laughed at something her real estate agent said. She believed she was days away from finalizing a deal. Didn't realize she had already triggered the very condition that would remove her control. I didn't confront Victoria that night. I didn't wave the letter in her face or announce what I had discovered. Instead, I drove into town the next morning and requested a private meeting with Mr. Callahan, our family's attorney for nearly 3 decades. He listened carefully as I placed the letter on his desk. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he nodded slowly as if he had been expecting this moment. "Your father was very specific," he said, opening a locked file drawer behind him. "The will read yesterday covers surface ownership. The trust document governs control. They are not the same thing." He slid a thick folder toward me.
Nice.
Inside was the formal trust agreement, signed and notarized 3 years earlier. The clause was clear. Any attempt to list, market, or negotiate the sale of the estate within 12 months of my father's passing would trigger an automatic review. If intent to sell was proven, executive authority and property control would transfer immediately to me as successor trustee. "Has she made contact with any agents?" Mr. Callahan asked. "Yes," I replied. "Multiple?" He adjusted his glasses and exhaled softly. "Then the condition has likely already been activated." The process moved quickly after that. Formal notice was prepared. Documentation of her communications with brokers was secured. By late afternoon, the legal mechanism my father had designed years ago was set into motion. Victoria still believed she was negotiating from a position of strength. She had no idea that the very actions she thought demonstrated control had quietly dismantled her authority. By the time the official letter reached her hands, the estate was no longer hers to command. Victoria received the formal notice 2 days later. I was in the study when she stormed in, the document trembling slightly in her hand, not from weakness, but from disbelief. "What is this?" she demanded. "This says my authority is suspended pending trust review." I remained seated behind our father's old desk. "It's not a review," I said calmly. "It's an activation." Her confidence cracked for the first time. She called her attorney immediately, pacing the room as phrases like conditional transfer and successor. Trustee echoed against the walls she had planned to sell. The more she argued, the clearer it became. The trust was airtight. Her attempt to list the estate had triggered the clause exactly as our father had designed it to. Within a week, control officially shifted, not through drama, not through shouting, through documentation, through foresight. Victoria stood on the front steps the morning she left, staring at the property as if it had betrayed her. "He chose you," she said quietly, almost accusingly. I shook my head. "No, he chose the estate." Thomas watched from the garden, silent as always. The staff remained. The house remained. The oak tree still cast its long shadow across the lawn at sunset. Victoria inherited the announcement. I inherited the responsibility. And in the end, legacy didn't belong to the one who claimed it first. It belonged to the one who understood what it was worth.